Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a realistic candle flame. Let's go ahead and get started. We want to make sure we're in our FX tab, and I'm going to go to Fluids and create a 3D container. Now this container is way too big, but first I want to drag this up just above my wick. I went ahead and created a candle. You can do the same if you want, or just follow along for the tutorial. I'm going to scale down this 3D box by going over here to my fluid shape. And I'm going to scale this down to about 5 on each side. Your scale might be different depending on the size scene you're working with. I have mine pretty realistic to what a candle should be sized. So if you have that in mind, then these values should be similar. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this down. We don't need this emitter, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it because we want to emit from the candle wick itself, not from this. So I'll just delete this. Now, how do we emit from the candle wick? That's very easy. What we want to do is grab the wick and then grab the container. If I can grab it. And then we'll go back up to Fluids, and then we'll go to Add Edit Contents, Emit from Object. Now if I press play on the animation slider, you'll see that we are emitting from the wick itself. Now this looks horrible, so we need to change quite a bit of settings. So let's go ahead and get started with that. First thing I want to do is give this a little bit more resolution. So I'm going to make sure I have my fluid 1 selected, and I'm just going to crank this up to about 50 so I can see what I'm dealing with. Now you can see it toned it down a lot and it looks a little bit nicer. We still need to tweak a lot of details. The next thing I want to do is change the emitter rate. To do that, we want to make sure we have this selected. We'll go to Basic Emitter Attributes over in the Attribute Editor. Click that drop down, and then it'll be right here. Rate %. I want to change this to probably like 500. We'll see what that does. And then you can see it goes at a much faster rate. Now what I want to do is turn off the fuel. We don't have fuel for this, so it's okay if we turn this off. So let me go to Fuel Method, No Emission, and then just crank this down to 0 since we don't have any emission. And that should be good for that. Now let's go back over to our fluid box. I'm going to scroll down to Content Methods. I want to make sure temperature is set to Dynamic Grid. This is what we'll use to change the color, or not the color, sorry. We'll change the values down here. Where is it? Should be under Content Details and Temperature. If we didn't have that checked, this would be grayed out and we wouldn't be able to change these values, which we'll change in a second. So let's go ahead and keep going. Now I want to go to Dynamic Simulation. I want to change a couple values here. Some of these other values aren't too important. I want to change the damp. I want to change this to about 0.1. And let's see what that does. So as you can see, it cuts off all of that excess, which is really what we need for a candle. We don't want all of it going up here. We don't want the whole flame going up here. So it tones it down a lot, which is very, very good. However, this is toning it down way too much, so I'm probably just going to crank this to like 0.1. Or I think it was at 0.1. Let me do like 0.5. It's a little better. You can always change this. I think it's still too low, maybe 0.8. Okay, I might have to come back to that. Let's go to, see, what else can we change? Substeps. This will basically give you more detail in your flame. So I usually just crank that up to like 2. that should be good. Might change the rate scale at 2 just so this plays back faster. And then I'll go to content details. I want to change the density. So I want to change the buoyancy to maybe like a 5. Just to give it a little bit more, whatchamacallit, a little more oomph to it. I think that's too much actually. Maybe change it back to 2. And then this is staying way too long. We want this to dissipate. We don't want it to rise like that. So I'll change the dissipation to maybe 2 as well. I think that's too much. See how it fades away? That's what we want, but we don't want it that high. So I'll probably do like 0.5. Okay, that's looking good. Diffusion, this one is going to give you that candle shape. So we'll crank this up. You don't need to crank this one up high. I'd say probably like 0.1 might be too much still. Yeah, it kind of flares everything out a little bit. So I might need to change, let's see. Let me try 0.05. And then I can maybe lower this dissipation a little bit as well. The buoyancy might be too high still. I might have to change the damp. I think the damp is probably too high for my scene scale. Let's see what that does. Let me rewind. Maybe still a little too much. Okay. Now it's kind of flaring up a little bit more. Let's go back to diffusion. And I can try playing around with this again. Maybe like 0.1. That's still too much. I'll try 0.0. I'll just do 0.05. All right. It's looking decent. We can still change a couple of things. Let's go down to tension. I want to change this. I usually change this to like 0.1. I think it gives it a little bit more realism. And right now, our smoke or flame is too stagnant. It doesn't have any fluctuation to it. We want to give it a little bit of turbulence. So I'll probably crank this to like 0.1. That way it will like kind of sway back and forth, as you can see. And then velocity, I'll drag this down. I want to give it a little bit of a swirl. Turbulence might be too much. Maybe 0.05. Okay, might have to come back to these values. All right, now we want to go to our temperature. I want to crank this buoyancy up to probably like 150. That way it kind of goes more vertical. It rises faster. And then we'll have to change the dissipation, most likely. Maybe I might crank this down to 100. Maybe even lower than that. 75. And then for the dissipation, I can crank this up, since we don't want it going all the way up there. Maybe even more than that. Maybe 1.5. Diffusion, I'll leave that as is, since we already have diffusion. And then I'll just put like maybe a tension on this one as well. What else can I change here? I think that's probably good. Let's see what we have in our render. So I'm going to go to modeling. I'm going to stop the animation so everything can repopulate. Go to Arnold and render. And let me just see what we have. Let me bring this over. Oh. So you can see that we don't really have any flame visible. Let me show you how we can fix that. Let me put this over here. I'm going to go down to shading. I'm going to, first I want to change this color. I don't want to see the density, so I'll just drag this value to black. And then I want to go down to where it says opacity. And I want to click this, and then I'm going to minimize this a little bit if I can. It's not letting me. Let's see. Drag this. So this is where we will be able to make tweaks so we can see the amount of flame we have. So I usually drag this up around here, and then drag this down right around this area, and then this one as well. And then I might move this one over. Just play around with it. Doesn't have to be exactly like mine. And then I might flare this out, or no, I'm gonna flare it. Might keep it like that. Still need to tweak some values. So we can tweak the color, for example. Let me do that. Can't really see it in the viewport. There we go. Also, what I could do is go down to find it. I need to select my box, go to textures, or sorry, not textures, lighting, and click self shadow so we get a shadow on the flame. And then I might change these colors a little bit. I might bring this over here so it's brighter. And the same with this. And then I want to add a white because the middle is very bright. So the way this reads is this is the outer edge and then this is the middle. So from left to right, it goes from the outside to the inside. Now let's see what this looks like with our render. That looks a lot better. Still needs to be tweaked a little bit. I want to add a drop off right here. So what I can do is go to this drop off shape under shading and change this to a sphere and then just crank this up. So it's a little more of a, it's not as harsh of a transition. See, it looks way nicer. Now I still need to edit these colors. I'm not loving the colors too much. What I can also do is crank up this input bias, which will give it a brighter value. So let's see what we get now. I'll show you that. I'll try working with my render on the same screen. It's getting kind of clustered. Let's see. So as you can see, it's a lot brighter. I like that a lot more. I think it looks more realistic. Let's just play around with it a little bit more. Maybe something like that. And then we can always drag these values around and kind of give us what we're looking for. I think something like that looks nice. And what else can we do? I might need to tweak the opacity because maybe I don't want this much blur around my flame. So let's do that. Go back to my opacity. And I might just drag these values in. Just play with it until you get what you're looking for. Might need to drag this down. And then drag this one out a little bit. Or might, yeah. Drag that one out. Do this. And I might need to drag this part This part, no. I'm liking how it was before. So I think that's pretty nice effect. I might leave it like that. And then what else can we do? Let's see. Input bias, crank this up maybe a little bit more. It's too much. Maybe a little bit more drop off. Just so it's not as harsh right here. See, without the drop off, we get that kind of unrealistic looking flame. In reality, it kind of tapers a little bit right on the wick. I think that's nice. I'm still not loving this outer edge. Let's see. Might have to crank up the input bias. Let's keep playing around with this until we get what we want. Drag this way. I think I just made it worse. Oh, undo that. I might just drag this down. Yeah. That's more what we're looking for. Maybe not as much of that glow. I think that's good. Okay. Let me play this on the animation, give it a little bit more twirl maybe, so we can get a nice render with the twirl. Might have to crank that up somewhere up here. Where is it? Forget where it is. There. Or the swirl, not twirl, sorry. Give it like a 2. And then let me go ahead and render this. And that looks nice. I'm going to press play with the render open. And let me zoom out just a little bit so you can see the top of the flame. Yeah, I think that looks nice. I can always keep coming back and tweaking my values, but I don't want to make this video too long. You get the idea, guys. This is how you create a realistic looking candle flame in Maya with just a few settings and not too much effort. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.